In this movie, I'm going to show you how to save images for the web. Before I can do that, however, it's important that I explain to you what the different formats are and when you should choose one format over another. So the formats you probably know already are JPEG, GIF, and PNG, or PNG, and I just wanted to run through quickly here what the benefits and detriments of each format is. So starting with JPEG, the one with which you're most familiar, as you know, JPEG is great for full color images. That's why most of the images you download from the internet, the images you get out of your camera, most likely those are going to be JPEG, is because they compress full color images really, really well. The downside to JPEG images, however, is that they don't understand transparency. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but basically if you need transparency, JPEG is not a format you can use. You'll also note that JPEG is not the best for flat color images, such as logos and so forth. What's best for that is a GIF. And so GIF is really good for flat color images, really good compression, and compression meaning that it makes the file size very small. And GIF does support transparency. The downside is that the type of transparency it supports is not what's considered anti-alias transparency. So that means if you have an angled edge or a rounded edge, you're not going to get a real smooth rendition of that. It will have white pixels around it typically. So you'll see what that means in a minute when I show you the examples. It's also not very good for full color images because with GIF you're limited to how many colors can be included in the image, and so it's generally not going to render it nearly as well as JPEG does. Okay, moving on to PNG. Now we'll talk more a little bit later on about what PNG 24 means. It relates to color bit depth. But for right now, just call it PNG. And you'll notice in this list here that it's great for full color images, great for flat color images, and it supports anti-alias transparency. So on the surface here, it's like you kind of go, well, why wouldn't I just use PNG for everything if it does all those things so well? Right! Well, the detriment is that it takes a whole lot of memory to do this. And the reason it gets such great results is it doesn't compress very much and therefore maintains all the color information the file has to offer. And so great format. You should use it when you need to, but if you don't need to use it, if JPEG or GIF will work just as well or better, then you need to use them because they're going to take a lot less memory. Okay! Here's a website I've made which shows 3 different images in the 3 different web image formats. And the purpose of this is to show you the images in context in the actual formats so that you can start to understand why some languages are going to be better than others. And so this first image I'm going to show you, the dog playing poker, is a square cut image, meaning that it doesn't need transparency. Just has square right angle sides, and you can see the JPEG is doing a really good job with this. Now the background all of these images are sitting on are half gray and half white, so you can see how the different formats handle transparency. So like I said, this one does not have transparency, so JPEG is doing a very good job. Now here's exactly the same image rendered as a GIF. You'll notice that in some of the areas of the image it looks okay, but other parts do not. If you specifically look at the background, it doesn't look very good. It's got what's called banding in it, and that means that it doesn't have enough colors to render it as a smooth gradation from the red to the black. GIF has a limited number of colors to work with to render an image. So a JPEG has access to millions of colors. A GIF has access to 256 maximum. And then finally, here is a PNG. And so you'll see this looks absolutely beautiful. It looks as good as the JPEG. We don't need the transparency for PNG, but the image itself looks really, really great.
Thank you very much.
Let's look at the amount of memory these 3 poker dog images are taking. If you look at the JPEG on the left, the one which I think looks as good as any of them, only takes 20K. The poker dog GIF doesn't look nearly as good, primarily in the background where you get that banding, and it's taking 15 more K. In other words, 75% more memory. So that would be a really bad choice. When you're looking at this stuff, what you're trying to do is get the best quality image you can for the least amount of memory. And that leads us to the Poker Dog Ping. I mean, he looks great. He looks just as good as the JPEG, and some people might even say it looks a little bit better, has a little sharper, a little more contrast. But you're paying a heavy price for that. He's 100K. So if it were me, I would definitely choose the JPEG because the quality of the image is excellent, and it's taking 1/5 the amount of memory of the PNG.
Totally, for sure.
Okay, so let's move on to the next set of images. Now, these are all typographic, and I want you to pay attention to some things here. The quality of the letter, how it looks, and then what image does with the background. So this JPEG, because JPEG does not understand transparency, this file was transparent in Photoshop, from which I made this image, but because JPEG doesn't get it, it turns that transparency white. So if I needed that type to be sitting on a gray background, JPEG is not going to work for this. Okay, so here is some type, but this time it was saved as a GIF image. So you'll see on white, the GIF looks great. On gray, I do get transparency, but you see that kind of ugly white line around the letter. Well, that's because GIF does not understand anti-aliasing. And again, that is what allows the image to be rendered very smoothly along transparent edges. So let's finally look at PNG here. Looks pretty darn perfect, doesn't it? Yes! So it looks great whether it's on white, but most importantly, it looks great sitting on the gray. So if you look at these three, and you have to decide, is your type going to show up on white? Is it going to show up on a color background? And that's going to really define which format you choose. In this case, if it's going to be on white, I would go with GIF. If it's going to go on a color or a pattern background, you'd have to go with the PNG. JPEG is not an option. Okay, the last image I want to show you is Santa Cat here. And this first one is a JPEG. And again, if you look at it on white, the picture of the cat is in a circle. It looks absolutely great. The JPEG does a really good job of rendering the colors in this image. But if this was going to sit on the gray background, well, that isn't going to work because I'm going to end up with a white box around it. So again, in Photoshop, this had a transparent background, but when I saved it as a JPEG, it converted that transparency to white. Moving down to the GIF here, you're going to see a similar problem that we saw in the first two images. Number one, you'll see that kind of white line around the edge of the circle because it doesn't understand anti-aliasing. And then if you look inside the image in the red background, again, you'll see that banding happening. So it's not able to smoothly render the image. And then last but not least, here's our ping. And so this is kind of perfect in every way. So the image looks great. If I want it to sit on a gray background or any color background, it's going to look just beautiful. And in looking at the amount of memory these takes, I think you'll see that the logical choice, if you need transparency image, is going to be ping. But you're going to pay a price for that, 104K, compared to 19K for the JPEG image. So if you're going on white, you'd be hard-pressed to come up with a good reason to use the PNG. It's using 5 times more memory. Okay, well, let's get down to how to save a web image.
Yes, dear.
And I'm in Photoshop now, but it works pretty much exactly the same way in Illustrator. And it's quite simple. All you do is go to the File menu and pull down to Save for Web. Now you'll see there are equivalent keystrokes, but you might have to involve a couple of toes in order to pull this off. Basically, it's Command-Option-Shift-S. So I'm going to select that. And then you will get your Save for Web window showing up. Now at the top, you'll see these different tabs. And my favorite is 2 up. And what that means is it shows you the original image as it is in Photoshop, and then it shows you what your image will look like if you save it with the current settings. And the settings are all defined up here in the upper right. So you'll see right now is you don't need to mess with the preset. Just go right here to where it now says JPEG, and you can choose from the drop-down menu which format you would like. So starting with JPEG, I tend to go with the defaults for JPEG, which is high, a quality level of 60, and it doesn't matter too much if progressive is checked or unchecked unless it's a very large image, so you can leave that as it is. And you'll notice down here at the bottom that it will show you the amount of memory the image is taking. So you'll see the original Santa Cat Photoshop image is 244K. The Save for Web JPEG here is going to be about 17.5K. So you can see the size of the images. Yes, you can adjust in here, although I don't usually recommend you do that. I recommend you adjust the size in Photoshop before you save for web. And that's kind of it for JPEG. So let me talk through the other formats here. Now let's go up to GIF. And GIF is a little more complex in terms of what you have to deal with. So you will notice that you get the transparency back, but you will see this little white line kind of around the edge of the circle.
No.
And so I know if I'm going to save this as a GIF, I'm not going to have transparency because I don't like the way that looks. So I can uncheck transparency and that will make it white. But then looking in here, I see the banding. Now, remember, you can choose to use more colors, but I'm already at the maximum number of colors I can use, which is 256. So that's as good as that image is going to get. So GIF isn't going to work for this particular image, even if I don't care about the transparency. And regarding memory, you'll see that this is taking almost 29K. So on top of being not as good of an image as the JPEG is, it's actually taking about 50% more memory. So there's two good reasons not to use GIF for this image. Now let's go down to PNG. Now you'll notice that there are two PNGs. There's an 8 and a 24, and if you remember in the chart at the beginning, I specified 24. A PNG 8 is pretty much the same as a GIF, so there's really no point in using that. The PNG 24, however, will give you that nice, beautiful rendering of the image. And I will go back and check transparency here. It will give us that nice transparency. There isn't that white line around the circle anymore. And so these settings are very simple, and as you see them here, are going to be just fine. But now back to the downside. If you need this image to be transparent because you're going to put it on a pattern or a background, then you're stuck. You need to use PNG because it's the only way for the image to look good and have nice transparency. But 101K. So that's the price. It's worth it, but just be aware that anytime you add memory, you may cause your page to load more slowly. So once you've decided the format you want, what you'll do is you'll simply save. We'll open up a window that will allow you to navigate to the folder you want to save it in. So I'm going to go to the Site folder, and then inside of there I have a folder called In Class, Week 2, and then finally Images. Once I've indicated the location I want the file to save to, I confirm that the name is correct and that it has the correct extension. And then down here at the bottom, just confirm that the format is set to Images only. And then finally click Save, and that's it.